Welcome, 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 everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out with you. Yeah, I still got the prison wall behind me. I apologize. I'm still temporary accommodations. I am in the process of redesigning my new studio, but you're just going to have to put up with the cinder block. You know, I'm sorry. I keep telling you it's going to go away. It's still there. So enjoy it while you have it. Very, very soon, we should have a new background behind us. So we're working on that as we speak. Folks, we got an exciting show for you today. And I mean that. This is something I think that comes up in various circles as an appraiser. At least it has in my circles as I've been appraising the past 20 plus years. Various questions centered around this topic today. But before I introduce our guest and before I introduce the topic, I want to remind you that we are sponsored by OREP Insurance. OREP, of course, is the E&O insurance that I personally choose to work with, and there's a reason for that. Can't wait to tell you more. But for now, you can go to orep.org. That's OREP.org. We're sponsored by DataMaster. DataMaster allows you to save 30 to 60 minutes per report by entering the data for you. Also avoiding fat-fingered and other human error. That's what DataMaster will do for you. Check them out at datamasterfreetrial.com/coach. One more time, it's datamasterfreetrial.com/coach. And finally, we are sponsored by Alamode Software. I love my Alamode. Out doing several inspections today, and every single one of them, of course, I use the mobile app provided by Alamode. Can upload and download directly to my office from the field. You ought to try it. Go to alamode.com to learn more, or you can call them at 800-ALAMODE. Well, folks, today we're going to be talking about a topic that may sound a little confusing, even with the title. But as we get into it, you'll kind of, I think, understand a little bit more what we're chatting about here, and that is the ability, or the requirement, rather. That's probably a better word. The requirement for an appraiser to remain unbiased and not allow their personal interests to reflect their appraisal process and their appraisal report. Now, if that sounds a little confusing, it probably is, but here to make sense of it is the one and only Mr. Tim Andersen. Tim, thanks for joining us and taking time today.
Dustin, thank you. It's an honor to be with you again. I appreciate it.
You know, I have to tell you, folks, Tim's a good guy. Tim keeps his finger on the pulse of what's going on in the appraisal world. He reaches out to me at various times and just says, hey, you know, what about this topic? What do you think of that? And I mean, the guy is super accommodating. I think I rescheduled with you about 3 times today, and yet here you are, made time for us, and I appreciate it, Tim. I think you saw this comment as well on the Facebook group that you're a part of, the All-Star team. Somebody made a comment that when Isaac is on, when Tim Andersen is on, they listen with both ears because they learn, and I just can't tell you enough how much we appreciate you coming on today.
Dustin, thank you again. It's an honor to be with you. I enjoy working with my fellow appraisers. I enjoy helping my fellow appraisers.
Perfect. So let's dive right into this. So first of all, you know, Tim, before we even get into USPAP and get into the various things, let's talk first of all about the term personal interest. What are we talking about phraseology wise? Let's talk about that term personal interest.
Well, I remember one of the first times I read the USPAP document about personal interest, and I'm thinking, okay, buyer, seller, broker, lessor, lessee, lender, builder, contractor, etc. And I'm thinking, okay, I can't accommodate their personal interests. But then when you think about the document for a little while, when you read it, unfortunately, as much as I have, when you read the document, you go, oh, well, wait a minute. You just had a list of buyer, seller, broker, etc., but you left out another person. You left out yourself. You left out the appraiser. And we have to be very careful of accommodating our own personal interests. Now, you say, well, oh, no, I would never do that. I'm unbiased. I'm impartial, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, okay, somebody calls you up on the phone and just reams you out sideways because of something you did or didn't do in an appraisal, and you've got to fix it. Well, you've got to be careful that you don't accommodate any personal interests in coming back and answering the questions. For example, they say, now, you will look at these new comparable sales and you will change your value opinion. Well, okay, maybe. You're going to change your value opinion. Occasionally, you get better data.
Yeah.
But then you change your value opinion because you got better data. not because somebody said, here, do this, dummy. You weren't smart enough to get it right the first time.
Okay.
So a personal interest is just that. It could be yours, or it could be one of the parties to the transaction.
And I want to circle back to that in just a minute, as far as giving, let's say, a realtor or a borrower hand papers and says, here's some comps you need to consider. I want to talk about that, but let's lay a foundation for just a minute. First of all, I should have introduced you in the beginning, Tim, as a USPAP instructor. And I know you're not speaking on behalf of being a USPAP instructor, if you will, but your knowledge goes a long way. Let's talk about USPAP for just a second. Uniform Standard of Professional Appraisal Practices. Does that book talk about accommodating personal issues when we're talking about appraisers and the development of the appraisal and or the appraisal report?
Oh, yeah. And it starts out literally at the very beginning. If you look at the preamble, it says in so many words that the purpose of USPAP is to promote and maintain a high level of public trust in appraisers and what appraisers do. So as we're talking about trust, it's like your doctor. You may not like the news your doctor gives you, but your doctor is ethically bound to give it to you, right? The public has to be able to trust us. And the public doesn't necessarily have to like us, but the public has to be able to trust us. And part of that trust is we're going to tell them the truth, whether they want it or not, whether they like it or not, whether they can accommodate it or not. But they've got to understand that we're going to give them the righteous, I was going to say righteous poop, but I probably can't say that. So we're going to give them the correct information, even if they don't want it. Therefore, they can trust us to be truthful. Then, Dustin, consider the definition itself of an appraiser. According to USPAP, an appraiser is someone who is expected to provide evaluation services competently and in a manner that's independent, objective, and impartial. I and O, independent, impartial, and objective. In other words, we're going to tell them the truth. We're not going to sugarcoat it any more than necessary. I mean, we have to be professional and polite and courteous. But when there's a hole in the roof, we're going to tell them there's a hole in the roof. Now, we don't have to say the hole in the roof is so big you can drive a truck through it. But we are going to say there's a hole in the roof, and please see the attached photographic evidence of that.
Okay, this actually brings up a story. This is a true story. Years ago, and this was long before HVCC, I had a mortgage company, a local mortgage company, call me on the phone after I turned the report in and said, would you please remove the pictures and the comments concerning the mold under the sink? Okay. No, I'm not saying, okay, I'm going to do it. I said, okay, did I really just hear you correctly? Are we talking about personal interest at that point when someone asks you to do something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
That's their personal interest.
Yeah.
Their response is, well, we can't sell it to the investor if you talk about mold. Right. And our response should be, and yeah, that's your problem, dude, not mine. Right. Then why don't you get in there with a bottle of Clorox and clean that mold out? Because there's mold under there. And if you don't like it, do something about it. Don't honk at me. It's not my problem. It's yours.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so we're not just talking about the definition of an appraiser here. USPAP goes into personal interests in other sections as well, right?
Well, look at the definition of the word bias, according to USPAP. And I don't have it right in front of me. But it's something along the lines of you favor or you are inclined to favor the position of another party in the transaction. Now, consider this. You're minding your own business and you're playing solitaire one day at your computer and you get a request to go appraise a house that's under contract. So you go out there, you get a copy of the contract, it's $250,000. And it's a nice house, but you notice that there is some accommodations in the house for those who obviously need to use a wheelchair. Well, okay, that's fine. The point is, those accommodations are going to appeal to someone who needs wheelchair assistance. Whereas if someone buys the house who doesn't need that, they're probably going to have to take it out. So therefore, it is a potential superadequacy. So you mentioned that it's a potential super adequacy, and you come in at $230,000. That's, you believe honestly in your heart that that's the best you can do. Well, 2 days later, you get just the nastiest email from the broker telling you that the people who are going to buy the house are a family, a three-person family. He is a war hero. He lost both legs in battle in service to our country. And the house is very close to a VA facility where he is being treated for his injuries. And then the daughter is autistic and must attend a special school, of which there is only one in the state, and it happens to be 2 miles away from this house. So it's very convenient for the family, both for him as well as her. And then the broker ends the email up with something like, now, get your dead butt off your high horse and appraise this house properly so these people can get what they need. Now, do you accommodate their interests? I don't know.
I guess it depends on if you hate the military and autistic people.
Well, let's just ignore that horribly snotty remark on your part, Dustin. And, you have a decision to make. Are you going to accommodate this one family to get this particular house simply because they need it? If indeed the market says, nope, it ain't there, then you may have an ethical problem. If the market says, well, the value is really somewhere between 225 and 260, but you just happen to like 230 because it was a Tuesday, okay, maybe there is reason to change it, and that would not be accommodating personal interests. But the point is, appraisers have to understand what personal interest is in order to accommodate them or not accommodate them. And indeed, USPAP says, don't accommodate personal interests. So if you're going to change a value, a market value, okay, change it. But then change it because there is a market-based reason to change it, not because it's Tuesday and you got nothing else to do.
Okay, so let's back up for a second. And really what we're talking about, Tim, is the personal interest really of the party that is involved here. You defined that a little bit earlier as you started out. You talked about, possibly a party to the transaction would be the lender, would be the builder, would be the seller, the broker, the buyer. Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned that there's more to that. Again, will you emphasize that again for us? Who's the other party that we need to consider here?
The other party is the appraiser. Are you going to accommodate personal interests? I don't know if any of you have been to San Antonio. San Antonio is a big military town. Yeah. And I was there not too long ago. And obviously, I was waiting for a flight. And a flight was coming in. And one of the first soldiers off the airplane was wearing a Medal of Honor. And every military man that could see him immediately came to attention, because that's what you do when you see someone who has won, or who has been awarded the Medal of Honor. He'd also been badly wounded, which you could see. And now you say to yourself, there goes a hero. Okay, yes, there goes a hero. There is a man or a woman who is willing to sacrifice his or her life for the rest of us. Okay, so that person's a hero. Now, despite that heroism, if you're appraising his house, are you going to take into account he's a hero, or is he just a buyer of a house? Yeah. And what USPAP says is, okay, Mr. Appraiser, despite the admiration you may have for this person, despite the fact that this person has obviously done something extremely out of the ordinary, extremely unselfish, that really shouldn't make any difference when you're coming up with a credible value opinion, because the public has the right to expect us to treat everybody the same way.
Well, and I have to ask, and I think I've given this example before, Tim. So listeners, forgive me, and I'll make it brief. But several years ago, I did an appraisal. I remember it very clearly. I remember the neighborhood I was in, just because it was so poignant about what happened. There was a little girl laying on the couch the whole time. She was somewhat covered up with blankets and various pillows and such. No problem. I could take my pictures around her. Not a big deal. I didn't really pay her much attention. As I was walking out the door, this was after the inspection. This was after I had gathered all the information that I needed. I was on my way out the door, and the mother said, "Please do what you can. If we don't get this loan, that little girl is probably going to die because she won't have the money that she needs to get her cancer treatments.
Yeah, no pressure there.
Yeah. Can you imagine? And my heart broke for her. But at what point, see, now what do I do as an appraiser? I've heard appraisers online say, at that point, you walk away. At that point, you cannot not be biased in that. I don't know that I agree with that. Can't I, as a professional, take that information, listen to that information, empathize with that family, but still be unbiased in that process?
Dustin, in the Arctic cold light of logic, no, you can't.
Yeah.
Okay. Because cancer, emphysema, autism, whatever, don't come in to the spectrum of what affects market value. So now, yeah, your heart breaks without question. So you're going to say to yourself, all right, what is it I do? Do I help them out here? Or do I walk away? Because obviously now I'm biased. And the point is, there is not the answer to that question. There is your answer to that question. And if someone were to call me up, and obviously I'm not emotionally involved in the issue, I would say, you got to walk away. Because now you're emotionally involved. And as soon as you're emotionally involved, you are by definition biased.
Yeah. I don't recall, because it's been so long, I don't recall what happened in that situation. Don't remember if I walked away. Don't remember if I continued. I think, and if my memory serves me correctly, which it may be not, that was the comment that she made to me, but there was no indication of what that magical number was. In that case, does that change your mind? Can an appraiser be unbiased? Because, hey, if we don't get this loan, we're up the creek without a paddle here as far as our daughter goes. But if there's not a magical number that I supposedly am supposed to hit as an appraiser, does that change things in your mind?
Well, that certainly makes it easier, Dustin, than it would had this particular mother said, well, we really need $1 zillion. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, my daughter's going to die because she won't get her cancer treatment. Let's face it, every time we come up with a value opinion, we have chosen it from a range. Okay.
Sure.
Now, your range is 225 to 260, and you just happen to like 230 because it was Tuesday. All right. Well, could you just as easily go to 255? Well, assuming the data were there, mm-hmm. Yes, you could. But the question is, why?
Yeah. Okay.
Are you doing it to accommodate someone's personal interest, or are you doing it because the market says to do it? So if you're doing it to accommodate someone's personal interest, even though you're coming up with the same number, if you're doing it to accommodate your personal interest, the homeowner's personal interest, the lender's personal interest, then that is technically a violation of USPAP and the ethics rule. Because the ethics rule says thou shalt not accommodate personal interests. Although I will admit that sometimes pure humanity must overcome that. But from purely an Arctic cold standpoint of logic, no, you can't accommodate personal interests.
Okay.
Fortunately, we're humans and we have emotions and we can mitigate that. But from the pure light of logic, no.
Okay, Tim, I want to dig into this a little bit further, and when we come back from the break, I want to talk about opinions, and specifically appraiser opinions. I'm going to ask you about carpet color. I'm going to ask you about cigarette smell. I'm going to ask you about various things that we as appraisers deal with on a regular basis, and I'm curious as to what your answers would be. Oh, and I want to come back to that question about comps, because I think that's an important one if we're handed a stack of paper. I want to pause here first and remind you folks that you won't be handed stacks of paper when you're dealing with DataMaster, because DataMaster is paperless. The ability to be able to pick your comps from your MLS, hit one button and have not only your comparables, but your subject information from the tax records, as well as your MC sheet directly inputted into your appraisal report. Well, Dustin, wait a minute, you can't do that. Well, yeah, you can't officially. You can allow DataMaster to do that hard work for you, but of course, you're still responsible to make sure that that data is correct. As an appraiser, it is your responsibility to do so, but why not be an efficient appraiser and allow technology to work for you? DataMaster will do that. Their new system is going to be out very, very soon, but you don't have to wait, because the system, the original, is out right now, and if it's in your area, you should be using it. Go to datamasterfreetrial.com/coach. Once again, it's datamasterfreetrial.com/coach, and check them out for 2 full weeks, unlimited. I promise you will not turn back. Speaking of not turning back, I have not turned back ever since I changed my E&O from where I was before, he who shall not be named, to OREP. OREP is the company that I've been using for several years now, with good reason. Folks, I love the ability to pick up the phone and to dial a number and to be greeted on the other side, not by a robot, not by a recorded voice, but by a human being who cares about appraisers. That's what OREP will do for you. Folks, they are a broker. As a broker, they have an obligation to you, the appraiser, to be able to shop around and find the best rates, and they do for me. The first quote that I got a few weeks ago as I was ready to renew, I about fell on the floor. And I called Lori and I said, Lori, seriously? And she goes, oh, no. This is just one quote of many. Just hold your horses. They're coming. And they did. And I saved money again this year with OREP Insurance. Check them out right now at orep.org. That's OREP.org. And finally, we are sponsored by a la mode. Folks, I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast today that I was out doing several inspections today in beautiful Star Valley, Wyoming, and I used my mobile app. Now, the internet is not excellent in Wyoming, as you might imagine, especially in Podunk, Star Valley. No offense to Star Vallians. But it's a beautiful place, but there's not a lot technologically going on there. But even with the slow internet, I was able to download and upload reports all day long because a la mode has tweaked everything to make it as seamless as possible. Folks, to be able to gather your pictures, your data, and your sketch right there on site, upload it to the office so that they can start working on it before you even get back to the office. That's what a la mode will allow you to do. Check them out right now at alamode.com or 1-800-ALA-MODE. And folks, we are back. We're talking today about personal interest as it has to do with the appraiser and what our responsibility ethically is when it comes to personal interest. Welcome back to the program, Mr. Tim Andersen, USPAP instructor and friend and frequent guest here on the Appraiser Coach podcast. Tim, welcome.
Dustin, thank you. You realize, of course, you're going to get letters from everybody in Star Valley. Which means you might get 5 letters, but no, go on.
When I said Podunk, I thought, man, that even for me, because I kind of consider myself a Star Valleyan because I spend so much time over there. It's a beautiful area.
Yeah, it is.
If the listeners have been there, they know what I'm talking about. Beautiful mountains and rivers and streams, and it's a great place to be. Tim, we were talking about the personal interests of there's various parties, and then we run into the situation of the opinion of an appraiser. Let me give you an example of what happens sometimes, and I see this bantered back and forth on the internet when it comes to appraisers. We might be setting up an appointment. Our office might be setting up an appointment where I'm going to come out and do an inspection, and the question from the borrower comes, do I need to clean the house? And I've instructed my assistants to tell them, well, no. That's not a requirement to have an appraiser walk through your house. He's looking at the house itself. And of course, I think in the back of their mind, they're thinking, well, but would it appraise for more if it were clean? And honestly, Tim, I don't know if I can answer that question because what I see is what I see. How much of that is influenced by the dirty underwear on the floor? How much of that is interest? I've got to give a C value. I've got to give a condition value. Is that reflective of the cleanliness? Now, I know it shouldn't be. But it's a tough one because we're human. Let's talk about humanity and how that plays into all this.
Well, over the years, my family has owned various rental properties. And I remember we rented to a gentleman and his wife for about 20 years. And that rent check came the first week of every month like clockwork. But he smoked, and we knew he did. But okay, we're willing to put up with that. Well, he finally shuffled off this mortal coil, to quote Shakespeare, and we went in to get the apartment ready, and we knew that we'd have to. And let's just say that it was obvious that he smoked. And I'm not going to tell you what it cost to put that unit back into rentable condition, but let's just say a lot. Now, had we thought for a few moments and just think, oh no, let's just put it on the market and get rid of it. This is ridiculous. But then we would have had to have put it on the market most likely at a price that would reflect the need to clean it up. So rather than take that loss, we cleaned it up. we brought it back to average and typical condition. So an appraiser walks in there, appraiser sees the damage from the smoke, and by damage from the smoke, I mean, when we were cleaning it, you could spray just water on the wall, and the water as it dripped down the wall was dirty brown from the smoke. I mean, not even soap in the water, just the water.
Sure.
Well, is an appraiser going to take that into consideration? Yes, the appraiser is going to have to take that into consideration from a condition standpoint, and that's not accommodating a personal interest. Now, neither you nor I smoke, so we're very sensitive to that.
Sure.
Whereas other people choose to smoke and they're not sensitive to it. But when it affects the condition of the property, yes, the appraiser can take that into consideration, and that is not accommodating a personal interest. That is merely reflecting the condition of the property.
So the thought that comes to mind is that would need to be provable, right, Tim? In other words, it's one thing to say, you know what, I think this home's going to sell for less because it smells like cigarette smoke and that the walls are stained. It's a whole other thing to actually have, I'm not going to go so far as to say paired sales analysis, but to have homes that have that smoke. How do you even, I mean, I'm at a lot. How do you, it's not like they're going to reflect that in the MLS, I guess.
Okay. All right. That's the magic of an extraordinary assumption. Okay. Or excuse me, I'm sorry. That's the magic of a hypothetical condition. You would say something in the report such that you recognize the fact that there is going to be a cost to return the property to its average and typical condition, but you don't know what that cost is, and it's beyond the scope of an appraisal to determine it. Therefore, you are appraising the property under the hypothetical condition that that problem did not exist.
Okay, so you treat it similar to a repair, and
yes.
Well,
it is a repair.
Yeah. Okay.
It is a repair. Yes.
Okay, good. So let's go back to the item at hand. As we talk about just being human, just the fact that we have feelings, we're not just robots. We do get emotionally involved to different situations. I remember, Tim, when I first started appraising, and I think it was probably my first USPAP class that I took. And I had a USPAP instructor stand up and use the example of the orange shag carpet, right? And I remember very clearly, at least I think I remember, this is the way I've remembered it over the years. Who knows? Maybe she didn't actually say this, but this is what I heard. As an appraiser, you cannot make a determination as to whether or not that orange carpet is going to reflect on the market, because you may like orange carpet and someone else may hate it. Now, talk to me about that. That doesn't seem to me like she was speaking from a place of authority, in the sense that isn't that something also that you can prove in the market, or should at least try?
Well, this is a really good example, Dustin, of accommodating a personal interest. You hate orange shag carpet, therefore you're going to take a $2,500 nick to account for the fact that somebody's going to have to go back and replace the ugly orange shag carpet. Well, okay, but obviously at least somebody liked orange shag carpet because they put it in.
Sure.
And maybe the buyer likes it.
Did, right?
There are two people with bad taste. And the buyer may like orange shag carpet. That's one reason they bought the house. Or they bought the house for other reasons, and the first thing they're going to do is get rid of that nasty orange shag carpet. Mm-hmm. So unless you can show by a paired sales analysis or regression analysis or some other market-based way that orange shag carpet is a functional depreciation of sufficient magnitude to merit an adjustment, you ignore it.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go, folks. That I've always wanted that question answered from somebody who actually knew what they were talking about, Tim. Thank you.
Oh, well, then let me go get somebody who knows.
Okay. Let's talk about comps. I'm at an appointment. I meet a realtor there. Happens to be the selling agent. Shows me through the property. Very accommodating. Very full of information. Talking to me about this, that, and the other. I'm taking my notes. I'm doing my thing. Get ready to get in the car, and I say, "Is there anything else that I need to know?" And she says, "Yes." And she reaches in her car. She pulls out a binder. She hands me the comps that I'm supposed to use for this appraisal. Where does an appraiser go from there?
Okay, let's not beg the question here. Let's not beg the question that she's going to assume that you're going to use solely those comps. Now, does the realtor, or excuse me, let me use the more generic term, does the broker have the right to hand you comps? Yeah, of course the broker has the right to hand you comps. The broker's an advocate. The broker is trying to convince everybody in the world out there that this is the finest house in the world and this is a great price, therefore pay it. Part of our job is to see through that falderall and persiflage. And persiflage is a nice way of saying crap. To get right down to the market value of that property. Now, every appraiser has had brokers hand them data.
Sure.
Well, okay, analyze it. We're analysts. That's what we do. Analyze it. If it's data that is going to help you form a value opinion, use it. If it's crap, don't use it. Mm-hmm. And when you get the nasty note from the reviewer saying, we know that the broker gave you comps, why didn't you use them? Your response is simple. They're crap. Well, that's not difficult. And I don't see that takes any great moral courage to say. And, nobody wants to hurt anybody else's feelings. Okay, nobody wants to be rude. Okay, that's not a problem. But, okay, so maybe you don't like the word crap. But maybe you could say something along the lines, well, I analyzed them, and I concluded, based on market data, that the sales I used are adequate to determine a credible value opinion.
Good. I like that.
Although it's easier to say they're crap.
Not as professional, but easier to say. One of the things that I do, Tim, and just to put this out to the listeners to consider is why not take the opportunity to educate whoever hands you those comps there, not in a condescending, down your nose way. But I what's interesting, Tim, is when I'm handed comps, it almost always comes with a question. And the question is it okay if I give you these comparables? Are you okay with that? I assume maybe they've had appraisers that have refused them in the past. I don't know. Maybe they know a little bit about personal bias and they don't want to step on toes. And for the most part, I know I'm going to get hate mail for this. I think realtors, for the most part, are professionals and they're trying to do their job well. And so they ask the question, is it okay if I hand you these? And I say, sure. I will consider any data. Just know that there's no guarantee that I will use these comparables. I will certainly look at them, and if they are comparable, if I find that they lead me to a credible result, then I will, I might include them. But don't be offended if I don't use any of them. If I find more credible data, I'm going to use more credible data. In other words, I take the opportunity to educate them a little bit. Not that they wouldn't know the answer to that anyway, but that way there's no misunderstanding as to whether or not I'm going to use those comps. I'm going to look at them, and I may or may not use them.
Right. And again, you're the analyst, you're the appraiser, you're the one who chooses the comps to use. And the broker has the right to give you whatever data he or she thinks to be appropriate. And then you have the right to analyze those data. And if they're inappropriate, not use them.
Okay. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. And we're going to have to start winding down here in just a little bit, Tim. This is a conversation that could go on and on and on because I've got all kinds of hypotheticals that I'd love to throw out here. But let's talk about the big elephant in the room. We've talked about the fact that an appraiser is a party to the transaction, and USPAP requires, the ethics rule requires that we remain unbiased, that we are an unbiased third party. The biggest concern, I think, and this is the concern that is brought up because of the housing crisis of 2008, so many things, and this is where the fingers get pointed at the appraiser. Let's talk about the other big bias in the room, and that is getting paid.
Appraisers get paid? Oh, my, Dustin, I think you're different than Idaho. Oh, right, okay. Right. Theoretically, we want to get paid, theoretically. And one of the best ways to do that is to keep our customers happy. But unfortunately, appraisers don't have customers, just like doctors don't have customers. Mm-hmm. Appraisers have clients. Doctors have patients.
Sure.
Okay? Eventually, I don't care when you start your medical career, your patients are eventually going to die. So you got to get new ones. All right? Appraisers have the same thing. Our clients are going to die. Now, that may be a metaphorical death because We told them that there was absolutely no way on this green earth that that house is worth a dime more than $300,000, and they're just convinced as they can possibly be that it's a $400,000 house. So we may lose that client. No, okay, get another one. Now, is that an easy thing to do? No, but part of what an appraiser has to do is market. One of the problems that I've had in my career was I've spent so much time with my nose stuck in a computer analyzing that I didn't market particularly well. And that's my fault. It's nobody else's. So we have to get paid, but that also means we're going to have to get out there and shake some hands and say hi to some people and say, I really like your business. And of course, that's one of the reasons that we go to conventions every year. So we can meet with our fellow appraisers, so we can meet with AMC, so we can meet with the vendors, know what's going on, stay on top of what we're doing, so that when we have to market our services, we can intelligently, forthrightly, and properly. But we all know that there's going to come a time when the client is just not going to like us. And maybe, Dustin, maybe we need to fire some clients. Maybe we need to say, you know, you're just too much of a pain to deal with. You know, you don't pay very quickly. You're constantly sending me stupid stips, and you want me to take a low fee, and every time I bid a higher one, and you eventually take it. Maybe, Dustin, that's a really good reason to fire that client and go get another one. Or maybe it's a reason to completely get out of the AMC arena totally and do private work. So yes, we want to get paid, and we'd like to get paid a lot, since most of us tend to be capitalists. Therefore, we have to concentrate on the getting paid part, but yet not giving up our personal integrity in order to do so. And the thing is, we can, although some of us find it difficult to do the necessary marketing.
Okay, I want to talk about, before we close here, you mentioned to me off the air a statistic, 95%. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, Dustin, there are studies, university-level studies going back to the 60s, dealing mostly with FHA and VA appraisals, that show that over 95%, or excuse me, let me back up, when dealing with a purchase and sale agreement, that over 95% of the appraisals came in at or above the contract price. And about 3%, in other words, of the 5% remaining, about 60% of those came in very close to the contract price. Now, this does not prove a causal relationship between contract price and the final value opinion. But it's one of the elephants in the room that's really hard to ignore. It's hard not to reach that conclusion, that it's the appraiser, you know, wanting to keep the business going, that they come in close to the purchase and sale price. Well, let's face it, the purchase and sale price was reached by a free and open negotiation between the parties, and it indeed may reflect market value. But 95+% of the time, you've got to ask yourself the question, is somebody accommodating personal interests? And again, there's no causal relationship there, but it certainly looks as if there is.
Something smells fishy. Well, Tim, you're keeping us safe, my friend. I really appreciate you joining us again, helping to educate appraisers across the nation. That's Tim Andersen. And listeners, I hope that you've listened well today, because these are things that we're dealing with daily as appraisers, and we need to remember where bias lies and check it at the door. Tim, thank you.
Dustin, thank you. My best to your family.
Likewise, my friend, likewise. And folks, you've been listening to another episode of the Appraiser Coach Podcast. Don't forget that upcoming very soon, in fact, when this airs, we may be right at the door as we start the Appraiser Academy, which will begin July 24th. Folks, I hope you will join us. Jump online. Just go to theappraisercoach.com and go to memberships and find out why you should be involved in a monthly online interactive live meeting with me and other appraisers across the nation. It's the Appraiser Academy. Hope you will join us, folks. Thanks for joining me today, and we will catch you next time.